Hi there. Okay, everybody can hear me okay? Great. So if I can just ask you guys for a second, who here has developed VR content? Okay, so we've got a couple people. And room scale VR or mobile VR, room scale VR? Okay. A little bit. Cool. So we're going to talk about one of the games we've released already for VR called Snow Fortress, and one of the games that we are bringing to VR that is one of our existing titles. I have to figure out how to use this thing. Okay. There we go. So Mythical City Games is a mobile, PC, and VR development studio based here in Vancouver. Our main series of games is called Battlefleet, and it's a World War II strategy game series. And then we've also released a couple of mobile casual games, and most recently Snow Fortress, which is our VR game. So I'll show you guys the trailer for Snow Fortress to get an idea of how what the gameplay looks like and how it works. Or if I can go back and play that. There we go. Is that playable? Well, perhaps not. So this should be a video. And we should have a video separately as well for it. Any chance? Oh, there we go. So this is the keynote presentation, yeah. That would be it. So the top slide there on the left. Yep, right there. If we can just hit play on that one.
Hold the trigger to make a snowball. Build your fort with the blocks around you. Hold the trigger to make a snowball. Build your fort with the blocks around you.
Cool. So that's Snow Fortress, and it's out on Steam for the HTC Vive now. If we can go to the next slide, there we go. So Snow Fortress is a more of a casual game where you can build a snow fort out of the blocks around you, and then you can have snowball fights in VR. This is the first VR game we've developed, and it's currently in early access on Steam. And the reason we did that is, as this is our first VR title, we really wanted to learn a little bit more about the VR development process, what the community wants, what works and what doesn't work in VR. So I think that's a great way to go if you're developing some new content and want to test some stuff out in VR, is put it up on early access. The game is in room scale VR as well, so it allows you to walk around your play area and actually interact with the blocks and objects around you. It's designed for the HTC Vive, but we are planning to bring it to some of the other HMDs this year as well, so for Oculus, OSVR, and other ones. And then the full game should be released later this year. So why room scale VR? So right now there's a couple of different types of VR. There's the mobile VR, there's sitting VR, and there's room scale VR. We found that the room scale is really one of the most immersive VR experiences you can have. So that's something that we really wanted to go for. The positional tracking gives your body presence in the space, which is really fantastic. So when you can actually walk around the space, you start to feel like you're really there. The other great thing about it is it's a physical and natural movement. So it's something that everybody's pretty much able to pick up very quickly without a lot of instructions, without having to learn control schemes or game pads. You can, if you want to walk over somewhere, you just walk over to it. If you want to pick something up, you just pick it up with a tracked controller. So the third part of, or fourth part of it is the tracked motion controllers. And this is where I think VR and room scale VR especially really starts to take off. Once you're able to interact with the world around you in a physically natural way, that's when it really starts to kick in for people that, yeah, I'm actually here. I can really participate in this world. So just a little video of a YouTuber playing the game, so you can get the sense of kind of how much interaction and motion there is in this process while you're playing it. It's a very physically demanding kind of experience after a while. Which has been really great for people playing it. So some of the VR development challenges, I'll touch on some of the same things that we were talking about in the previous talk, but just very quickly. Movement in room scale VR. So this is still an issue beyond the actual space that you have to walk around in your room. How do you get to further parts of the map? How do you walk around in a big world? So teleportation is one of the main means of locomotion right now. It allows you to point at a part of the terrain and just suddenly teleport there. It sounds a little bit odd, but once you start to actually play around with that and you play with the teleportation for a few minutes, it really becomes very natural. But as this was our first VR game, we didn't want to add too much complexity to it. We wanted to do something that's simple and fast to put together, and something that we didn't have too many variables that we'd have to control. So we designed the game to fit just within the actual player's play area. So that's where you can put together the fort, is just right around you. So you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to learn any controls about how to move, you don't have to get used to any of these other movement techniques. One of the other big areas is focusing the player's attention. So in a traditional game, as I guess they might be called from now on, you would have, if you wanted to get somebody's attention, you would simply move the camera to that spot. So if you wanted to show them something, you would move the in-game camera to that position, and you would show the player what you want to show them. In a VR game, you can't control the camera because the camera is the player's head. So they can look around at any point, they can turn around, they can interact and look anywhere. So one of the things that becomes really important is level design and guiding the player's attention through something that would be in film terminology, mise en scène, where you would design the scene to guide where somebody should be looking, where they should be walking towards, what they should be interacting with. As an example of that, in Snow Fortress, we have a main menu scene where we have a couple of menu options and things that you can, game modes that you can pick. So, but what if the player loads in facing backwards? Because we don't know actually which direction they're going to be facing in when they start the game. So to help resolve that, we've put we've built the environment around that. So we put trees and a forest behind them so that if they load in facing the wrong direction, they'll see a forest of trees, so they'll know that there's nothing to do that way. They'll be able to turn around and see what we want them to interact with. In the actual game, when you're fighting the other snow forts, there's little signs that show you which direction the snow fort is. We found that isn't really necessary, but we just put it in for testing. And one of the other big areas is positional audio. How do we get players' attention when we know that they're going to be most likely wearing headphones? For any of the kind of desktop room scale VR stuff, to get the full experience, people will probably have headphones on. So positional audio is going to be very key to guiding players' attention and getting their attention to look at something and inform them of what's going on in the world around them. So if you have a monster coming up from some direction, if the monster is making a sound, and the audio is done with positional audio, they'll instantly know where that sound is coming from. So one of the other issues is UI and interaction with UI. Traditional 2D flat UI doesn't really work for the most part in VR because there's no screen area to really attach the UI to. There's no screen corners because the person can look around in any direction, and people are usually only really focusing on a very small spot in the very center of the actual screen. So even if you have things that are attached to the outside of their actual head, they most likely won't notice them. And if they do notice them, those things can become a little bit annoying. It's sort of like wearing glasses and having like a sticker on your glasses or something that's constantly in front of you where you look. So figuring out new ways of doing UI, UX and interactions is very important. Some of the things that we've come across, for example, is player health. So the first thing we started off is showing little hearts floating up in the UI above the play area. We found that nobody really noticed those while they were playing. Then we tried to put the hearts onto the player's gloves in the left example there with the green mitts. And we thought, well, you're holding these gloves all the time. They're always around you. You're probably going to notice the hearts, but found most people didn't notice them. The people that did notice them thought they were just decoration or like a little bracelet, so they really had no idea what that was. And then we came across the idea of putting snow on the players' hands the more damage they took. So as they started to lose health, their mittens would become a little bit more snowy. And that was kind of like a little subconscious way of getting across the idea of that they were getting more covered in snow as they took more hits. And that's worked very well for the game so far. We still left a little UI with the hearts floating up on the screen as a reference so that they know exactly how many hearts they have if they want to check, but most people intuitively just get it. Some of the other UI areas are, for example, to start the game, once you finish building your fort, once you want to start the game and start throwing, we had to figure out some interaction for that. So the first thing we did is just mapped one of the buttons on the controllers to start the level. But then we found we had to always explain what that button was. We had to show where that button was on the controller for people that maybe weren't used to it. And because we don't show the actual controllers as representations in VR, we show the mittens. We didn't really have a good way of pointing where that actual button was. So instead we put in a physical lever, as you saw in the trailer, that people can just turn around on the table, pull this lever, and it'll start the game for them. Another example of that is level selection. So traditional level selection, you would have a UI window with a whole bunch of levels, a little grid on there, and you'd click on a level to select it. So instead we've put to make it a little bit more interactive, we've put our levels into little snow globes that show representations of each of the snow forts they're going to be facing off against. And then when the player picks up that snow globe, they're able to be transported into that level. So that brings me to Battlefleet 2. So this is one of our existing games that came out about a year ago on Steam for desktops as well as on tablets for Android and iPads. Battlefleet 2 is a World War II naval strategy game. Here's a brief trailer of the regular version of the game just to get an idea. So as you can see, it's a bit of a complex strategy game. It's got a lot of content in it, a lot of features, a lot of ships to control, fleets, and campaigns. So the idea of bringing it to VR is sort of likened to a miniatures war game, like a table in front of you where the ships are little models and miniatures that move around. Except in VR, they have life to them. They actually move by themselves. They're on fire. They can you can interact with them, and they can shoot their weapons, things like that. So it's kind of a really fun interface, a way to play a strategy game. And one of the challenges we had with that is the scale of the environment. Usually the battles in Battlefleet 2 take place over a large island chain. The ships are kind of very small, as you can see there. And when this is a table in front of you in a room scale space, they may be very, very tiny. So the idea of being able to see a little more detail on them and getting closer to those ships is something that we really are working hard to bring into the game. From this little clip here, you can see, well, you can just look down at the ships, so you can just bring your head in closer, and that's one way of zooming in VR. That's very natural. And one of the other things that we wanted to do is control other ways to be able to move this battlefield around and maneuver around it and zoom in and out. So traditional sort of zooming with maybe some sort of a button or something could be a little bit difficult in VR because it would make you feel like you're actually changing size vertically, and that can cause a lot of motion sickness. So one of the things we did is brought over a technique from mobile of sort of a pinch and pull to be able to interact with that environment. So you press down the two buttons on your two controllers, pull them apart, and that way you feel like you're actually changing the map and the world around you rather than you're shrinking or you're actually changing in height. And that's been really great for interaction with the game. The other issue is, again, directing the player's attention. How do we get them to look at something? So this is a complex game with a lot of different ships. There may be 10, 20 different ships on the battlefield at one point. How do we get them to know what ship is currently selected, whose turn it is right now, what's happening somewhere? It could be something behind them that the next ship is moving. So one of the things that we did to solve that, very simply, it was attach a sort of a string from the controller to the currently selected ship. So whenever you're holding your controller, you instantly knew, because you could just trace where the string is connected to, you instantly knew what ship was selected. So that made it very easy to know. And then one of the other issues is, and this was touched on in the last talk, about audience size for multiplayer. So in VR, especially room scale VR with Vive, the audience size is still very small. So to get enough of that critical mass to have people to play against is still a little bit difficult. So one of the ways we're going to solve that is try to bring our cross-platform multiplayer from the regular Battlefleet into VR. So if you're playing the VR version on a Vive, you can play against somebody who might be playing it on a tablet or playing it against somebody who's already playing on a PC. So that opens up the multiplayer base to all of our players across the entire game. And now to give you guys a little taste of what this will look like. This is a sort of a preview, early version trailer of Battlefleet in VR as work in progress. So that is the end of my talk today. Again, I'm JJ from Mythical City Games. Thank you very much for listening, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.